Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today I will be talking about the future of politics in Georgia. And to this I will be looking at a couple of different maps showing the elections from 2012 up to the most recent election in 2024 and highlighting some of the most important changes in those elections. So to start out, we're going to look at the election map in 2012. So in 2012, Mitt Romney won Georgia by almost 8 percentage points. And as expected, he did very well throughout the urban parts of the state, the rural parts of the state, and then badly in the urban parts. You can see the major cities of Georgia. You can see the main metro Atlanta area right here. You can see Augusta, you can see Savannah, and then you can also see the majority black areas of the state running through a belt here and then down in the southwestern part of the state. So, Mitt Romney also did very well in some of these suburban counties of Georgia, like Gwinnett, Henry, and Cobb. These are counties that a lot of people, when a white flight fled to during integration. So they were educated, wealthy, white people. And so this was a voting bloc that Mitt Romney did very well with. They've supported his economic policy and his social policies. So when we look at the next election, 2016, we can see that Trump did slightly worse than Mitt Romney in Georgia, only winning Georgia by 5 points instead of almost 8. So if we go in and look at the county maps, we can see some important differences. So most of the rest of the state is the same. You still have the black areas going for Clinton, and then Savannah and the other cities going for Clinton. But you see that some of these counties around the metro Atlanta area have flipped. So those same counties, Gwinnett, Henry, and Cobb, have now been won by a Democratic candidate. And if we go and compare these elections, we can look at exactly how much they changed. We can see that Gwinnett by itself changed by almost 15 percentage points. We can see that Cobb changed by almost 15, and we can see that Henry changed by 8. While many other counties in the metro Atlanta area, like Forsyth, Cherokee, Douglas, Fayette, DeKalb, Rockdale, and Newton County to a lesser extent, all moved towards the left. So this was the most important part of the 2016 election for Georgia, is that Trump did much worse with these well-educated suburban voters than Mitt Romney did. And so this would be a sign that Republicans would do worse in the state. If they did not win these voters, they would steadily lose more and more votes in Georgia. And that's because Georgia's population is growing very rapidly, and a lot of the people coming in are this type of voter. They are wealthy, they are highly educated, and a large percentage of them are minorities, which the current Republican Party is not doing as well with. So if we go to 2020 now, let me go back to past elections, we can see that Georgia flipped to Biden by about 0.3 percentage points. You can see that is a pretty big change from 2016, where Trump won it by 5. And if we go and look at the counties again, we can see where some of that movement happened. You can see that it's basically the same, but some of the metro Atlanta counties have gone from light blue to dark blue, meaning that they went from, in like Henry County's case, they went from Clinton winning this county by 4% to Biden winning it by more than 20. You can see Gwinnett, Biden won it by 18, Clinton won it by only 6. And it's basically just the reason why Biden won the state was because he did much better with these suburban counties. They made a lot of ground. If we go to compare again, we can see that. Second, let me reload the map. See, if we look at the difference between 2020 and 2016, again, all of these counties shift to the left by quite large numbers. Henry County 16, Gwinnett County 13, Forsyth 14, Cobb 12, Douglas 14, and that's just a few of them. These are counties that flipped for the first time in 2016, and then Biden just expanded on those margins by a lot, which allowed him to take Georgia in the 2020 election. And so when you first look at this, it might not tell the entire story, because the entire 2020 election saw Democrats doing much better than Republicans. They won the popular vote by quite a bit. And so you might just think, well, these counties might have just flipped because of that region. They might have been swing voters that preferred Biden. But if we go and look at the next election, the 2024 election, which Trump won, going back and winning by about 2 percentage points, we see that Trump only won it by 2. And you would have expected, going from an election where Biden won by 4 to Trump winning by 2, it would be about a 6-point swing to the right. But in reality, it was only about 2.5. So a little bit less than half of what was expected. If we go into the county maps, we see basically the same story as the 2020 election, with some counties moving slightly more to the left in the metro Atlanta area. You can see that Fayette went from Trump winning by 7 to Trump only winning by 3. And see that Newton went from Biden winning by 11 to Harris winning by 15. And then Cobb going from about 14% for Biden to about 15% for Harris. And so Trump still did win this state, and it's mostly because of lost votes in the metro Atlanta area. Democrats did not pull out as many voters, but you can still see that their margins improved if we go to the election comparison. And this map paints a slightly different picture. You see that the main metro Atlanta counties, Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton, all moved slightly to the right. Again, less than expected for those counties considering how much the popular vote swung to the right, but still slight movement. But if we look at some of these outer suburbs of Atlanta, some of the ones where the city is just now expanding to and new people are moving to, you can see that they still move quite a bit to the left, even in a year where Trump moved the entire popular vote to the right. You can see like Henry County moved another 10%, Rockdale County another 7%, Fayette 4%, Douglas about 6%. You can see that it's kind of this outer ring that is becoming more Democratic. So that even counties like Forsyth and Cherokee, they did not move very far to the left, but they had a slight movement, which still means that in a year where a Republican wins 50% and a Democrat wins 50%, these counties would have moved to the left. And that is a good sign for Democrats in Georgia. This has been a swing state in the last 2 elections, and I think it will be in the next one, most certainly. But beyond that, it might be different. I think if these current population trends continue, Georgia will become more and more of a Democratic state. I think that the Democratic candidate in the next election is more likely than not to win Georgia, and I think after that, it might just continue trending to the left. Now, I don't think Georgia will ever be a state like California or New York or any of these Democratic strongholds, but I do think it will become kind of like Virginia, where Democrats win pretty consistently. They've won there in the national election the last few times, but then they also have Republicans like Governor Glenn Youngkin that can win because it's consistently very close. See that Harris won Virginia by 6 points, Biden won it by 10, Clinton won it by 5. And so I think it will kind of be in that area for the 2030s and 2040s. I think that the population growth from Atlanta is just bringing in more and more Democratic voters. Now, at this point, Atlanta's growth kind of seems unstoppable. At some point, it will slow down, meaning that the state will eventually just kind of like, it won't continue moving more left. It will kind of just sit in one area. But that is not happening in the near future. So that's just, I wanted to point out a couple of those important county changes on this map before we go to the second map, which is a more detailed look at the city. So this is the New York Times map. It shows every precinct and how they voted as well as the counties you can see. And I just wanted to highlight where the changes are happening. So going into a little bit more detail than the other map. So looking on here, you can kind of see that the metro Atlanta area is just surrounded by one big blue ring, and it's dark blue in most places, meaning that it moved to the left by more than 15 percentage points, which is a very large movement, and in some places much more than that. If you zoom in, you can see that on the south side of Atlanta, many of these regions in the south of Fulton, south of DeKalb, and Clayton County stayed basically the same or moved slightly to the right towards Republicans. And these are the majority overwhelmingly majority black parts of Atlanta. And that's one of the things that you probably heard in the news in the last few elections, that the Democratic Party is losing black voters. And you can see that it is true to an extent on this map. But the important part is just seeing by how much. You can see that in most of these, Biden still won 95, 96, with well above 90% of the votes in basically all of these places, and that it moved for the most part to the right by only about 2 or 3 points. And that's losing some, but it means that Republicans are not making up for their losses in other parts of the state. You can see that if they had moved black voters to the right as much as the Democrats had moved suburban educated voters to the left, Georgia would still be a Republican state, but they didn't. Democrats made up for their losses in the south of Atlanta with black voters by winning large amounts of educated suburban voters. You see that especially in these northern parts of Atlanta, these suburbs along 85 and these other suburbs, that there was very large movement to the left. You see that there's a lot of dark blue in these regions. And so this kind of shows that, like a more detailed look at it, you can see exactly where, because some of the counties in Georgia are kind of weirdly shaped. And so like Fulton includes a lot of suburbs of North Atlanta. And so you can kind of see in this that the southern part of Fulton moved to the right, and the northern parts of Fulton moved to the left. But this is basically why Georgia has become a swing state, is all this movement around Atlanta and other cities like Augusta and Savannah, but mostly Atlanta. This is where the majority of people moving into Georgia are going to. So you should see that in the coming years, there's the Senate election in 2026, and then the national elections, another Senate election in 2028, how much Georgia has changed politically in the last few years. Because census data has showed that hundreds of thousands of people are moving into Georgia. And, not all of them are Democrats, of course, but a lot of them are. I'd say probably a majority swing that way. And so it will change the state a lot. And so the 2026 midterm Senate elections might not give the best idea of this, because at this point, Governor Brian Kemp just announced he would not run for the Senate seat yesterday as of recording this. And so that will definitely swing the election. You'll probably see different margins than what the state believes, depending on what candidate they run. If it's a bad Republican candidate, Ossoff would probably win by much more than, if it was a normal candidate. A lot of these people in the suburbs of Atlanta, the educated and wealthy, don't really like candidates like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and so you might see them sit this one out or vote the other direction, which would probably show even larger movement in these suburbs. But that's all I wanted to say about Georgia today. I'm going to do an analysis of North Carolina, basically the same thing, later today. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.